If you've ever felt like your brain just does things differently, like you're stuck on autopilot, replaying the same thoughts over and over, acting on impulse and then wondering why, dreading change before it even happens, stressing about things that haven't occurred yet, or completely losing track of time, then this video is for you. I've pulled together some of my most impactful videos around these exact experiences. We're talking about autistic dissociation and autopilot mode, rumination and why the autistic brain can get so stuck in thought loops, autism and ADHD impulsivity, why change can feel genuinely unbearable, anticipatory stress, and how to actually handle it, and time blindness. These are the patterns so many of us live with but don't always have language for. So whether you're newly diagnosed, self-identified, ADHD, autistic, or both, or trying to understand your brain just a little better, I hope this compilation helps you feel seen, understood, and a little less alone. So let's get into it. Have you ever felt like you're just going through the motions, like you're watching your own life happen from slightly behind your eyes? You're answering questions, you're nodding, you're functioning, but you're not fully there. That autopilot mode people talk about, well, for many autistic individuals, it's not just a metaphor. It's a very real experience of dissociation and emotional disconnect. And today I want to talk about it properly. Why it happens, what it actually feels like, how it impacts your relationships, your memory, your sense of self, and most importantly, how you can gently find your way back. And if you haven't already, please consider hitting the like button, subscribing, and tapping that notification bell. It really does help this channel grow, and more importantly, it helps this community reach people who need it. And just a really quick side note here before we dive in. Every now and then I get a comment saying that I'm not autistic, that I must have some kind of mental illness, but not autism. To be honest, those comments don't upset me, not at all, but they do show me how much work we still have to do to spread awareness, because autism is a spectrum. And I know we hear that phrase all the time, but I really want people to understand what it means. It means there is no single presentation, no single personality, no single communication style, no single coping strategy. Every autistic nervous system adapts differently. So when someone says, "You don't look autistic," what they're really saying is, "You don't match the narrow version of autism I've been taught." And that's exactly why we need these conversations and why I do this channel, because every person's experience is valid. Full stop. Okay, now let's talk about autopilot. The invisible off switch, understanding autistic dissociation. Have you ever felt like someone flipped an invisible switch inside you? One moment you're there, the next, well, you're kind of not. You're still physically present. Your eyes are open, you might even be responding, but it feels like you've stepped back inside of your own head. Autistic dissociation exists on a spectrum. There's that word again, spectrum. On the milder end, it might feel like zoning out mid-conversation. You catch yourself nodding but realize you didn't process a word that was said. On the more intense end, it can feel dreamlike, foggy, blurry. Sounds feel far away or echoey. Your body feels distant. Emotions go flat. For me, one of the most intense experiences of this happening was when I had a partial melanoma removed from my toe. When we walked into the doctor's office, I would not stop talking. If you know me, or if you recognize this in yourself, you might understand that for some of us, talking is a stress response. When I'm anxious, I talk, I over-explain, I fill the silence, and I'm cracking jokes, and I keep everything moving. Now, my husband was with me and he knew exactly what was happening. He's seen it many times before. He knew I was dysregulated, but he also knew what was coming. Because when they started cutting into my toe and talking about the possibility of removing the toe entirely if the melanoma had spread, I shut down completely. I went silent, blank, still. It was like my brain pulled the plug. I wasn't panicking outwardly. I wasn't crying. I wasn't reacting. I just disappeared. My husband had to explain to them that I do this. that I was still there, just kind of not accessible. And that's the thing about autistic dissociation. It can look calm from the outside, but internally, it's a nervous system overload. And just to say, thankfully, they removed enough of the tissue and saved my toe. But that moment, that was autopilot mode in its purest form. It wasn't weakness, it wasn't survival. When an autistic nervous system becomes overwhelmed by fear, pain, sensory input, uncertainty, sometimes the brain disconnects to protect you. It's not dramatic, it's neurological. Navigating the autopilot fog, daily life and hidden impacts. And here's what people don't always realize. Autopilot mode doesn't just happen in big dramatic moments. It happens at the shops. It happens after too much socializing. It happens when the lights are too bright, the noise is too loud, the conversations overlap, and your brain quietly says, that's enough. For me, when it happens in everyday life, it feels dreamlike, like I'm slightly outside of reality. The edges of things soften, noise becomes echoey, voices feel far away, and I go quiet. Not because I'm upset and not because I'm angry, not because I'm bored, but because my nervous system has reached capacity. And the tricky part, other people don't see that internal shift. They might think she's being rude, she's not engaged, she's withdrawn, or she's in a mood. But inside my brain is trying to cope. Dissociation can affect social rules. You might miss subtle changes in tone. You might struggle to respond appropriately because you're not fully processing. It can affect memory. You can leave a conversation and barely remember what was said. It can distort time. An hour feels like 5 minutes, or 5 minutes feels endless. And emotionally, it can feel like numbness, like you're observing your life instead of living it. Beyond survival, when autopilot becomes the trap. Now, here's the hard part. Autopilot is protective in the moment, but when it becomes your default setting, it can start to erode your sense of identity. If you spent years disconnecting to survive environments that might overwhelm you, you might start asking, who am I when I'm not masking? Who am I when I'm not shutting down? What do I actually feel? Relationships can struggle too. It's hard to connect with someone who disappears emotionally. Partners might feel confused. Friends might feel shut out. And you might feel misunderstood. And layered underneath it all, shame. Why can't I just stay present? Why do I always disappear? What's wrong with me? But nothing's wrong with you. Your brain adapted to survive. The problem isn't your nervous system, it's the environments that overwhelm it. Finding your anchor, strategies for grounding and reconnection. So how do we come back? Not by forcing it, not by pushing through, and certainly not by shaming ourselves, but by building anchors. There's sensory grounding. Autistic brains are sensory driven, so grounding often helps best when it's physical and tangible. Hold something textured, run cold water over your wrists, press your feet firmly into the floor, name 5 things you can see. Give your nervous system something real to latch onto. And there's mindfulness, but make it concrete. Traditional mindfulness can feel abstract. Just clear your mind, just relax. For an autistic brain, that's not always helpful. Instead, try structure. Count your breaths. Count sounds. Trace the outline of an object with your eyes. Focus on the exact temperature of the air on your skin. Make it specific. Make it measurable. And build your personal reconnection toolkit. Start noticing your early warning signs. Do you talk more before you shut down? Do lights start to feel harsher? Do sounds become sharper? Does your body feel heavy? Your nervous system usually whispers before it pulls the plug. Learning these whispers helps you step away sooner. Reclaiming your presence, living authentically and thriving. Part of reclaiming your presence is learning to explain your experience. You might say, sometimes when I'm overwhelmed, I go quiet. It doesn't mean I'm upset. It means my brain is overloaded. That one sentence can change how people interpret you. And if dissociation is frequent, distressing, or deeply disruptive, seeking support from a professional who understands neurodivergence can make a huge difference. And I know seeking therapy can often be out of reach for a lot of us, so even just confiding in a friend or a family member might be helpful also. And finally, autopilot mode isn't a flaw. It's a protective reflex from a nervous system that's always had to work very hard, but you deserve more than survival. You deserve to feel present in your own life. You deserve connection, and you deserve safety in your body. So if this resonated with you, tell me in the comments. What does autopilot mode feel like for you? And as always, you are not broken, you're not dramatic, and you are definitely not too much. You're navigating the world with a beautifully complex brain, and that matters. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Have you ever had a thought that just won't leave? You replay the moment, you analyze every word, you imagine every possible outcome, and somehow your brain always lands on the worst one. If you're autistic, this isn't being dramatic, broken, or too much. This is rumination. And for autistic brains, it can feel relentless. Before we get into today's topic, I just want to say how beyond grateful I am that this channel has reached over 5,000 subscribers. Knowing that so many of you were counting down with me honestly means more than I can put into words. We're creating such a supportive, understanding, and compassionate community here. We're learning from each other, we're sharing experiences, and most importantly, we're realizing that we're not alone. So thank you truly to each and every one of you. This is a really big achievement for all of us. Now let's talk about rumination, what it is, why it's heightened in autism, and how it affects daily life, and what might actually help. And if this content resonates with you, please consider hitting like, subscribe, and tapping that notification bell. It really helps the channel and our community grow. So what is rumination? Rumination is when your mind gets stuck looping on the same thoughts without resolution. It's not problem solving, it's not productive reflection, it's replaying conversations, rewriting past events, imagining future catastrophes, and beating yourself up with hindsight. And the more tired or stressed you are, the louder it gets. So who experiences rumination and why it matters? Well, anyone can actually experience rumination, but it's especially common in people with anxiety, depression, OCD, and autistic people. And rumination doesn't just come along with these, it can actually contribute to the development or worsening of mental health difficulties. That's why understanding it and learning how to work with it matters so much. And it's interesting to note that not all rumination looks the same. So let's look at the 4 types. Number 1 is brooding rumination. This is the heavy, self-critical kind. It sounds like, why am I like this? I always mess things up. Everyone else handles things better than me. Brooding tends to spiral quickly and is strongly linked to depression and shame. Many autistic people fall into this pattern after social situations or perceived mistakes. Number 2 is reflective rumination. This one feels productive, but often isn't. It's analyzing and analyzing in the hopes of understanding. What actually went wrong? What should I do differently next time? If I just think about this some more, I'll fix it. Reflection can be healthy, but when it loops without resolution, it turns into rumination. And number 3 is intrusive rumination. These thoughts feel unwanted and uncontrollable. They pop in suddenly and don't seem connected to what you're doing. They can feel disturbing, distressing, or even frightening. And the more you try and push them away, the louder they get. This type is often linked to anxiety and OCD, and many autistic people experience this alongside sensory or emotional overload. And number 4 is deliberate rumination. This is intentional thinking about a difficult experience. It often shows up after trauma, major life changes, or life transitions. Sometimes it's part of processing, but without support or boundaries, it can become overwhelming and consuming. Autistic people often experience this when trying to make some sense of big emotional events. So why is rumination heightened in autism? Well, autistic brains are beautifully complex, but that complexity can make rumination more intense. We're often more detail-orientated, so one small moment can dominate our entire mental landscape. We have strong pattern recognition, which means our brains constantly search for meaning and cause and effect. Uncertainty feels physically uncomfortable, so our minds keep spinning trying to solve it. And many of us grew up masking, so we learn to analyze ourselves constantly. And then there's the emotional processing, which often takes longer, so thoughts linger instead of resolving quickly. Now, this isn't a character flaw, it's neurology meeting a world that isn't designed for us. So how does rumination affect daily life? Well, rumination doesn't just live in your head, it spills into everything. It can drain your energy, disrupt sleep, increase anxiety and depression, lead to shutdowns or meltdowns, make it hard to enjoy the present moment. It can create constant self-doubt, and over time, it can really erode your sense of safety within yourself. So let's talk about tools, real practical ones. Number one is building cognitive flexibility. Autistic brains tend to prefer clarity, certainty, and clear rules, so flexibility doesn't always come naturally. Cognitive flexibility is the ability to hold more than one possible explanation. Consider multiple perspectives and accept that not everything has a single right answer. You can gently practice this by asking, what's another possible explanation? What evidence do I have for this thought? And what evidence do I have against it? If someone I loved was in this situation, what would I say to them? This isn't about gaslighting yourself or forcing positivity. It's about loosening the grip of rigid thinking. Number two, use mindfulness and grounding to interrupt the loop. Rumination lives in the past and future. Grounding brings you back to the now. This can look like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 sensory exercise and focusing on physical sensations like the feeling of your feet on the floor and gentle breathing without trying to calm down. The goal isn't to stop the thoughts because that often backfires. The goal is to stop feeding them. Think of it like turning down the volume rather than ripping out the speakers. And number three is structure, predictability, and journaling. A predictable environment helps calm an overactive mind. Now, this includes clear routines, externalizing thoughts so they don't keep circling. And journaling can be incredibly helpful, but how you journal matters. Two approaches work best together. Raw journaling, which is uncensored writing. It's messy, emotional, unfiltered, and you write exactly what's in your head. No fixing, no reframing, no judgment. Research shows that writing for 15 to 20 minutes about difficult experiences can reduce emotional intensity because it moves thoughts out of your head and onto paper. Then follow with guided journaling. After the release comes reflection. You gently ask, what was I thinking? What emotions were underneath that? Was I catastrophizing? What might I say to someone else in this situation? This combination can give both relief and insight. And number four, engage in physical activity, especially nature. Now, movement helps discharge mental energy that gets stuck in rumination. And for autistic nervous systems, nature adds another layer of regulation. Since we've moved closer to the beach, I've completely rekindled my love of swimming. Growing up, I was lucky enough to have a pool in our backyard, and I spent all summer in it. My parents struggled to get me out. I absolutely loved swimming, and I'd never really been a beach person, but I have to say there is something about the ocean that just feels healing and fresh. Obviously, it's fresh. It's made a genuine difference to my mental health, and having that love of swimming back again, I am incredibly grateful. And if this resonates or you want to hear more about autism and nature, I do have a video about nature and regulation that you might want to watch after this. Number five, use CBT techniques for redirection. Cognitive behavioral techniques can help interrupt rumination once it starts. This includes writing the thought down, labeling it as a thought and not a fact, asking, is this helpful right now? Redirecting attention to a grounding task. CBT isn't about invalidating your experience. It's about changing your relationship to the thought. And I also have a detailed video on CBT tools if you'd like to explore that further. And number six is time-based strategies for rumination. This one feels counterintuitive, but it works surprisingly well. Schedule your rumination. Give yourself a specific time window, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Think it through, write it out or process it. When the thought pops up outside of that time, you can gently say, not now, I'll come back to this later. I do know this is easier said than done, That's why I personally get my family and friends involved in this one. I tell them what I'm ruminating about. And it's amazing how a different perspective can completely reframe things. I do love that saying, a problem shared is a problem halved. And I truly believe that. Number 7, practice self-compassion instead of self-criticism. Rumination is often paired with harsh self-talk. You should know better. Why can't you let this go? And we all know this one very well. What's wrong with you? Try shifting this to, this is my nervous system trying to protect me. I'm overwhelmed, not broken. It makes sense that this is hard. Self-compassion doesn't stop rumination instantly, but it removes the shame that keeps it alive. And number 8, seek professional support if needed. Sometimes strategies just aren't enough, and that is totally okay. A therapist familiar with autism can differentiate autistic rumination from anxiety or OCD. They can help with emotional processing and teach tools tailored to how your autistic brain works. And this one's really important to remember. Consider professional support if rumination consumes hours of your day, keeps you up at night or causes nightmares, leads to intense anxiety, depression, shutdowns or meltdowns, or interferes with work, relationships, or daily responsibilities, and if it triggers harmful coping strategies. Now, I want to share something personal here because I think it's really important. For a long time, I used alcohol to calm my brain. It's hard to describe, but I know many of you will relate. Alcohol made my brain feel normal, whatever normal is supposed to be. For me, it was quiet, less noisy, and I wasn't drinking to party because I'm a stay-at-home person. I was drinking to stop the rumination, but it never lasted long, and I always felt worse afterwards. And once I realized my relationship with alcohol wasn't healthy, I stopped and found better ways to cope. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I do also have a video on autism and alcohol if this is something that you're navigating. So if rumination is pushing you toward harmful coping, that's a clear sign that you deserve support, and sooner rather than later. Rumination doesn't mean you're weak. It means your brain is working overtime in a world that asks a lot of it. With the right tools, understanding, and support, it can become more manageable. And please know that you're not alone. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. I made a mistake. And I'll be the first to admit I can be a little bit impulsive at times. I used to change my hair color repeatedly because I thought it would make me happy. And to be fair, it did for about a week or two, but the underlying problem always remained. I was autistic and ADHD and didn't know it. I just knew I felt uncomfortable in my own skin, restless, like something needed fixing. And since I didn't know what that something was, my hair always copped it. Now, I have not done this for ages, and I genuinely thought I had grown out of this phase. But, it's been a little stressful lately, and my usual therapy of op shopping just wasn't quite cutting it. And yesterday, when I was at the shop, because my son needed more soap, actually, so I guess technically you could say this is really his fault. His soap was directly opposite the hair color aisle, and I tried not to look, I really did, but the bleach was calling to me. Hey, come on, I'm only $10. You'll be so happy. And I mean, $10 for happiness. You just can't beat that value. So I put it in last night, and here we are, orange. I genuinely thought at 46 I was over this need to fill a void with hair color, but apparently not. And I'd like to say this is the last time, but let's be honest, you can see in this photo here, I said that was the last time. And you can actually see the genuine look of regret in my eyes. But it's not all bad though, because it made me laugh, it humbled me, and the best part of all, it gave me a brilliant idea for a video. But before we go any further, please excuse me while I go and put another color in my hair to get rid of whatever this is. Okay, that is a lot better. Now let's talk about why so many of us, especially those of us who are autistic, ADHD, or both like me, can be impulsive. What impulsivity really is. When people think of impulsivity, they often think it just means being reckless or irresponsible, but it's so much deeper than that. In ADHD, impulsivity often shows up as trouble controlling sudden urges, acting before thinking, interrupting in conversations, making quick decisions without fully considering consequences, or maybe it's buying bleach because it's $10 and apparently happiness is on clearance. It's not that we don't care about the consequences, it's that there's often a gap between the urge and the pause, and that pause is controlled by executive function. ADHD brains struggle with response inhibition and emotional regulation. You know, the part of the brain that says, let's think about this. Well, sometimes it doesn't get a look in before the action happens. Now, with autism, impulsivity can look slightly different. For autistic people, impulse behavior is often tied to sensory overload, intense emotional states, or difficulty shifting attention. When we're overwhelmed socially, emotionally, or sensorily, our reactions can be fast and big. And when you combine autism and ADHD, AUDHD, I think they call it ADHD. I'm not sure how to say that right, so please educate me in the comments. I do need help on that one. You can get the urgency of ADHD layered over the intensity and sensory processing differences of autism. That can mean more frequent impulsive moments, more intense ones, more why did I just do that moments. It's a nervous system thing. Here's what changed everything for me. Impulsivity isn't just about willpower, it's about the nervous system. For many of us with ADHD and autism, our nervous systems are more easily dysregulated. We can shift quickly into fight or flight. And when our body perceives a threat, whether that threat is emotional, social, internal stress, boredom, uncertainty, or even just I feel off, your system wants relief, fast relief. Impulsivity can be your nervous system trying to protect you. Do something, change something, fix something, escape something. In that supermarket aisle, was the bleach dangerous? No. Was I stressed? Yes. Was I dysregulated? Probably. And was my brain looking for a dopamine hit and a sense of control? Absolutely. And that $10 box wasn't about hair. It was about relief. Powerful techniques to break impulsive thoughts. Now you might be thinking, but Michelle, why didn't you use the following strategies in the supermarket? And that is a really great question, and we will get to that later. But first, here's what might help. Number 1, the STOP method. Stop, think, operate, process. This is something practical that may help you stop the regret spiral before it begins. Stop, pause, do nothing. Say wait out loud if you have to. Interrupt the momentum. Think, what just happened? What triggered this? What is my nervous system doing right now? Am I overwhelmed, bored, seeking dopamine? Am I avoiding something? Operate or move. Shift your state physically. Take deep breaths, step outside, stretch, change aisles. Put the box back and walk away. Process. Later reflect. Was that fight or flight? What would my regulated self choose? This method has genuinely saved me from so many impulsive decisions. Not all of them, obviously, but many. Number 2, regulate the nervous system first. Because if impulsivity is dysregulation, the solution is regulation. So what are some tools that may work? Humming, singing, gargling. This activates the vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve in your body, a major communication line between your brain and the rest of you. It helps regulate things like breathing, heart rate, digestion, and plays a big role in calming you during stress. But when it's dysregulated, those calming signals don't land properly. Instead of shifting into rest and relax, your body stays stuck in high alert, leaving you tense, wired, and on edge. Next one is cold water on the face or holding ice. This can help reset your nervous system quickly. And deep pressure, like weighted blankets, tight hugs, compression. When we calm the body, the brain can think. Number 3, the 5-second rule. When an impulsive urge hits, count backward. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. and then act intentionally. That tiny gap allows your prefrontal cortex to engage. Sometimes 5 seconds is all it takes to stop orange hair. Sometimes. And number 4, create a daily strategy. Impulsivity thrives on immediacy, so build in delays, a 24-hour rule for non-urgent decisions. Write the urge down instead of acting on it. If you still want this tomorrow, then I'll reconsider. Most impulses fade, not all, but most. And number 5, reframe the shame. This one is huge because impulsivity often leads to guilt and shame dysregulates us even more. Instead of, I messed up again, try, my nervous system reacted, I can course correct. And instead of, why am I like this, try, this is how my brain responds to stress. What's my next big step? Self-compassion reduces the cycle. Shame feeds it. And now back to the question, why didn't I use these tools? Yes, I know these strategies. Yes, I'm teaching you these strategies. And yes, sometimes the impulse still slips through because I'm human, because regulation isn't perfection, because sometimes the thought of remotely looking like Margot Robbie derails all executive functioning. I know, Margot Robbie, that's who I had in mind when I saw that hair color, but the delusion was very strong yesterday. Very strong. But here's what's different now compared to 20 years ago. I don't see myself as broken. I don't see myself as dramatic. I don't spiral into self-hatred. I see a nervous system that wanted relief. And I course correct. I laugh, send my husband to buy more hair dye to fix it. I film a video and I move on. And if you made it this far, thank you. And you get to hear my final thoughts. Impulsivity in ADHD, autism, and ADHD isn't about being irresponsible. It's about regulation. It's about executive function. It's about a nervous system that sometimes hits the accelerator before the brakes engage. And learning to manage impulsivity isn't about becoming perfect. It's about increasing the space between urge and action. Sometimes that space is 5 seconds. Sometimes it's an hour. Sometimes it's orange hair. But every time we pause, regulate, reflect, we strengthen that muscle. And the goal is to never make mistakes. The goal is to understand ourselves enough to recover gently when we do. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go avoid the hair color aisle for at least the next 6 months. Probably. No promises. Have you ever noticed that change doesn't just feel uncomfortable for you? It feels unbearable. And I don't mean big, dramatic life changes. I mean the everyday stuff. Plans changing at the last minute, your routine being thrown off, thinking your day is going one way and suddenly it isn't. And when this happens, it's not just annoying. Your chest tightens, your emotions spike, your thoughts either race or completely shut down. And then you look around and everyone else seems to adapt just fine, which makes you think, why is it so much harder for me? I actually had a really clear example of this while writing this script. I got distracted, as you do, and started looking at editing software. I found one that looked amazing, better than what I'm actually using now and cheaper too. Sounds simple, right? Except my finger hovered over that buy now button because my brain immediately jumped in. Stick with what you know. What if you don't like it? What if you can't figure out how to use it? Then I talk myself back around. It'll be fine. Better sound, better quality. This is a good thing. So my finger would hover again and then stop. Over and over for more than 2 hours. And then my brain went, well, if you're changing software, maybe you should get a new camera too. Because, of course. At that point, I was completely overwhelmed. That was another hour of looking and stressing. It wasn't just software anymore. It was too much change all at once, and I felt confused, annoyed, and defeated, like my brain was about to explode. And that's when it clicked. This isn't about me being indecisive. This is my nervous system reacting to uncertainty. So instead of forcing myself to push through, I paused. I acknowledged how I was feeling. I reminded myself that yes, I will need these upgrades eventually, but not right now. I told myself, when I'm ready, I'll start with the software, get comfortable with it, and then I'll think about the camera. And I would like to say that I don't talk to myself a lot, but I do. It's how I work stuff out. Anyway, that calmed my nervous system almost immediately. Then I came back to writing this script. I'm still researching, and I'll let you know when I upgrade. That experience sums up exactly why change feels so unbearable for some of us. Struggling with change doesn't mean you're difficult or dramatic or resistant to growth. Most people who struggle with change are actually really trying hard to stay regulated. The problem isn't your attitude, it's your nervous system. And here's what most people don't realize. When something changes unexpectedly, your brain has already prepared for a specific outcome. So when that outcome disappears, your brain has to do a lot of work all at once. It has to drop the old plan, figure out what's happening now, predict what might happen next, describe how to respond, and manage your emotions at the same time. Now, that's just not a small adjustment, that is a full internal reset. So when someone else says, it's not a big deal, your body's already reacting like, yes, it is. It really is a big deal. And once your nervous system goes into alert mode, logic doesn't work straight away. This also is why it feels physical. For a lot of us, change doesn't just upset us emotionally. It shows up in the body. You might notice tightness in your chest, a knot in your stomach, feeling shaky, exhausted, or frozen, or wanting to withdraw or shut down. That's the fight, flight, or freeze. Your body isn't being dramatic, it's responding to uncertainty. And then there's the part people don't talk about, the crash after the change. Once it's over, you might feel drained for the rest of the day, like you need to be alone. Maybe you feel flat, tearful, or guilty for how strongly you reacted, even though you know you couldn't help it. And that's usually when the self-talk kicks in. Why can't I just go with the flow? Why am I like this? Everyone else copes just fine, but that self-blame only makes everything harder. This is where autism really matters in this conversation. For a lot of autistic people, or people who suspect they might be, change isn't just inconvenience, it's destabilizing. Autistic nervous systems tend to rely heavily on predictability, mental preparation, internal structure, and knowing what's coming next. So when plans change suddenly, it can feel like the ground shifts underneath you. You're not just adjusting plans, you're reorientating your entire internal world. And this is especially common in adults who mask, people who were called too sensitive or anxious growing up, and parents who are starting to recognize these patterns in their kids. And no, this doesn't mean everyone who struggles with change is autistic. But if you are autistic, this experience is probably very familiar. So what actually helps when change happens? This isn't about forcing yourself to get used to it. It's about supporting your nervous system, because that's where the reaction is coming from. For me, the first step is acknowledging my emotions. I don't try and talk myself out of them anymore. I'll literally say, I'm disappointed, and that makes sense. I'd prepared for something else. Of course there's a reaction. Naming the feeling without judging it helps my body settle so much faster. And after that, I gently reframe, without pretending that I'm fine. And I'm not talking in a just be positive way. It's more like, okay, this is hard. Where can I land now? And for me, that sounds like, I'm disappointed, but now I can write. That sucks, but now I can be creative. The feeling is still there, I'm just not stuck inside it. When plans change, my whole day can suddenly feel overwhelming, so I break the day into smaller parts. Just because one thing changed doesn't mean the entire day has to fall apart. I keep a few familiar grounding options ready. For me, that's writing scripts, answering comments, baking for my kids, or doing something practical like the washing. And I make sure I keep at least one thing the same, my morning shake, a familiar walk, or a comfort show. It's a quiet way of telling my brain, not everything is uncertain. Another big one for me is being around people who feel safe, people who don't diminish how I feel, don't rush me to move on, don't make me feel like I'm overreacting. That kind of support helps the nervous system settle faster than any logic ever could. And recovery matters. I don't just need to cope, I need to recover. That might look like quiet time, creativity, comfort activities, or low-demand rest for the day. This isn't indulgent, it's necessary. And one last thing that really helps, and I even said this to one of my kids the other day, you have to ask, what's the worst thing that can actually happen? When everything feels overwhelming, that question helps my brain come back online. It doesn't dismiss the feeling, it just moves me out of the panic mode. If change feels unbearable to you, there's nothing wrong with you. Your brain prioritizes safety through predictability. And once you understand that, the goal isn't to fix yourself, it's to support yourself. And if this video made you wonder whether autism might be part of your story, I'd love you to check out my other videos. I talk about late identified autism, masking and burnout, parenting autistic kids, and what everyday life actually feels like. Change feels unbearable for a reason, and when you stop blaming yourself for it and start supporting your nervous system, everything begins to feel a little lighter. If you found this helpful, like, subscribe, tap the notification bell, and as always, thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the waiting is worse than the thing itself? Days before an event, your body's already falling apart. Your stomach's in knots, you can't sleep, your heart's racing, your emotions feel completely out of control, and everyone around you says things like, but it hasn't even happened yet. Meanwhile, your nervous system is acting like it already has. Well, there's a name for it, and once you understand what's happening, it becomes a lot less scary. So if you've ever felt exhausted, panicked, or completely dysregulated before something stressful, not during, but days or even weeks before, then this video's for you. Hey everyone, welcome or welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Michelle and I'm an autistic woman raising 3 autistic kids with my ADHD husband. Before we get started, if I could please ask you to hit like, subscribe, and tap that notification bell. It really helps the channel and helps this community grow. All right, let's get into it. So what is anticipatory stress? Anticipatory stress is a specific type of stress that happens when you're worrying about something that hasn't even happened yet. It doesn't come from an immediate threat. It comes from imagining future scenarios, conversations, events, outcomes, and your body reacting as if they've already happened. Your nervous system doesn't wait for proof. It prepares just in case. Now, this isn't just an autistic experience. Anticipatory stress is something many people experience, not just autistic people. It can be triggered by things like job interviews, medical tests, travel, exams, big life changes, and social events. Almost everyone feels this at times, but autistic nervous systems tend to be more sensitive, more alert, and slower to calm down once stress starts, which means anticipatory stress can feel more intense and last much longer. Your nervous system reacts days or weeks early when you're anticipating something stressful. Your nervous system often flips into fight or flight long before it needs to. That can look like constant tension, feeling on edge all day, racing thoughts, and emotional overwhelm or shutdown. Your body's basically saying, something's coming, and we need to stay alert. Your body acts like the event is already happening, and this is where it can get uncomfortable and really confusing. Anticipatory stress isn't just mental, it's physical. You might experience nausea or stomach issues, loss of appetite, heart palpitations, trouble sleeping, shallow breathing, and big emotional reactions. And because there's no visible danger yet, you might start wondering if something is seriously wrong. Let me share a real example from my own life. We booked a family holiday to Queensland to visit the theme parks. I hadn't been on a plane in a long time, and the week before that flight was honestly awful. I was in a constant state of panic. I could hardly eat. My stomach was completely off. I had heart palpitations. I wasn't sleeping properly, and emotionally, I was just all over the place. And this was all before I even stepped foot on the plane. I genuinely thought, I am so stressed that I might just have a heart attack when I get on that plane. But the thing with anticipatory stress is that it's often worse than the event itself. And this was the part that really surprised me. Once I actually got on the plane, I started to calm down. I focused on my breathing, my body settled fairly quickly, and I did have one panic attack, but I was able to calm myself down again. And that's when I realized something huge. The anticipatory stress, the waiting, the imagining, the build-up, was far worse than the actual plane ride. My nervous system had spent an entire week in survival mode for something that turned out to be pretty manageable. Uncertainty is a massive trigger. Anticipatory stress thrives on the unknown. Things like travel, medical procedures, new jobs, social situations, and financial decisions. Autistic brains especially like the predictability. When details are missing, our minds try to fill in the gaps, usually with worst-case scenarios. And your brain isn't being dramatic, it's trying to prepare. Your nervous system is simply trying to protect you. Your nervous system isn't broken, it's not overreacting on purpose. It's just doing what it thinks will keep you safe, the rehearsing, scanning for danger, and staying alert. The problem isn't the intention, it's the intensity and how long it stays switched on. So before we get into this, I want to touch on something that you may be asking yourself right now. How many anxiety attacks a day is normal? And the honest answer is it really varies. Some people don't experience full panic attacks. They have lots of anxiety spikes throughout the day. That tight chest, the racing heart, the sudden wave of dread. If you're dealing with anticipatory stress, this can happen multiple times a day, especially when your brain keeps jumping ahead to the upcoming event. And again, that doesn't mean you're broken. It means your nervous system is stuck in anticipation mode. If panic-like symptoms are happening over and over every day, it can be a sign that anticipatory stress isn't properly being supported yet. And that's where gentle tools and sometimes professional help really matter. So let's talk about the 5 things you can actually do when this is happening. Number 1, name what's happening. Out loud if you can. This sounds simple, but it's powerful. Instead of thinking, what's wrong with me? Try saying, this is anticipatory stress. Naming it helps your brain stop treating it like an emergency. You're not in danger. Your body is reacting to a future situation. Even saying, this is anxiety, not a threat, can take the edge off those repeated anxiety spikes. Number 2, interrupt the future tripping. Anticipatory stress loves to replay the future on a loop. So the goal isn't to stop thoughts completely, it's to interrupt them. You can do this by grounding yourself in your senses, looking around and naming things you can see, bringing your attention back to your breath. Every time you bring yourself back to now, you shorten the amount of time your nervous system stays activated. Number 3, calm the body before you try to calm the mind. This is especially important for autistic nervous systems. If your body's panicking, logic just won't land. So what can help? Try slow, deep breathing, gentle pressure like a weighted blanket or hugging a pillow, progressive muscle relaxation. Now this one sounds really simple, but it does help, and that's warmth. A shower, heat pack, or a cup of tea. When your body feels safer, those frequent anxiety spikes often soften on their own. Number 4, create predictability where you can. Anticipatory anxiety gets worse when everything feels uncertain. So if you can't control the big thing, control the small things. That might look like preparing the night before, writing things down instead of holding them in your head, creating calming routines before stressful days. This is especially helpful if you notice anxiety flaring up repeatedly throughout the day. Your nervous system loves predictability, even tiny amounts help. And number 5, pay attention to frequency and ask for support if needed. If you're noticing anxiety spikes many times a day, panic symptoms popping up constantly, or stress affecting sleep, eating, or relationships, that's not a personal failure. It's a sign your nervous system needs more support. A therapist can help you learn tools like cognitive reframing, which helps break that constant cycle of what-if thinking. And they can check whether something like panic disorder or ongoing anticipatory anxiety is at play. Getting help doesn't mean it's that bad. It means you're listening to your body. So what are my final thoughts? Managing anticipatory stress is an ongoing process. It takes awareness, practice, and a lot of patience. But understanding what's happening and why can be incredibly empowering, especially if you've spent years thinking you were just too sensitive or bad at coping. You're not. Your nervous system is just trying to protect you, sometimes far earlier than necessary. And with the right tools, support, and self-compassion, it can learn that the future doesn't always need to feel like a threat. If this resonated with you, let me know in the comments. And as always, thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Have you ever sat down to answer one quick email and then you look up and somehow 4 hours have disappeared? Or maybe you check the clock after doing something you really don't want to do and it's only been like 6 minutes, but it feels like you've lived an entire lifetime in that time. If you're neurodivergent, especially autistic or ADHD, you probably already know this isn't procrastination. It's not laziness, and it's not that you just need to try harder. It's time blindness. And today I want to unpack why your brain experiences time differently, what's actually happening neurologically, and how we can start letting go of the guilt around it. And before we dive in, if this kind of content helps you feel seen, please consider hitting like, subscribe, and tapping that notification bell. It really does help the channel and it helps more of the community find this space. The title of this section just makes me think it could be an episode from the Twilight Zone. You'll see what I mean when I say the heading. The phantom clock. So let's start here. Time blindness is essentially a disconnect between chronological time, what the clock says, and experience time, what your body feels. Now, for a lot of neurotypical people, time runs quietly in the background. There's this steady internal sense of, oh, I've probably been here about 20 minutes. I should start getting ready. This will take about half an hour. It's subtle, but it's there. For many autistic and ADHD brains, that internal clock is fuzzy or inconsistent, or sometimes feels like it's just not installed. Time doesn't feel linear, it stretches, it collapses, it disappears, it ambushes you. And when executive function is steering the day, minutes can turn into hours, or hours can vanish completely. It's not that we don't care about time, not at all. It's that we don't feel time the same way. So what's actually happening in the brain? I think it's really important to talk about this part, because once you understand its wiring, not willpower, something softens inside you. In both autism and ADHD, time blindness is linked to differences in brain areas responsible for executive function, attention, and time perception. So let's talk about a few of them, but in human terms. The prefrontal cortex. Now, this is the part of the brain that handles executive functions: planning, decision-making, task switching, working memory, and time management. Basically, the let's organize our life department. And if your prefrontal cortex works differently, and in ADHD and autism it often does, then things like estimating how long something will take, switching from one task to another, holding future consequences in mind, and starting tasks become harder. You might know exactly what needs to be done, you might care deeply about it, and still feel like there's an invisible wall between you and starting. The gap between knowing and doing, well, that's executive dysfunction, not laziness. The basal ganglia. This area helps regulate movement and learning, but it also helps with timing and anticipating intervals. So when the system works differently, your ability to sense time passing can feel unreliable. And the cerebellum. People used to think the cerebellum was mostly about movement, but it's also involved in cognitive processes, including sequencing and time processing. So when we say time blindness is neurological, we mean it quite literally. Now, this isn't a character flaw, it's wiring. So let's talk about hyperfocus, because we can't talk about time without talking about hyperfocus. You know that feeling when you're completely absorbed in something. You're engaged, lit up, alive, and suddenly hours have passed, but it feels like 20 minutes. That's time dilation, and it can feel amazing. And I want to say this, flow states aren't bad. They can be creative, joyful, productive. They often tell us we're doing something aligned with our strengths. Now, I'm not saying eliminate flow states from your life, not at all, but here's where it gets complicated. Sometimes flow becomes a hiding place. If you're avoiding writing a report, you might accidentally spend 3 hours deep diving into a special interest. If you're anxious or overwhelmed, getting lost in something can feel soothing, and that relief makes it harder to transition out of. Sometimes we unconsciously use flow to avoid difficult emotions, anxiety, shame, and dread. That doesn't make you manipulative, it makes you human. The goal isn't to eliminate flow, it's about awareness. When time moves painfully slow. Now let's flip it. Have you ever waited for something you didn't want to do and every minute felt unbearable? Or tried to push through a task that doesn't interest you and it feels like time is crawling? That's the other side of this. Time contraction or emotional stretching. For many neurodivergent people, time is emotional. If you're engaged and interested, it flies. If you're bored or overwhelmed, it drags. Time isn't neutral. It's filtered through interest, nervous system state, and cognitive load. The sequence problem. This one's big. Often it's not that we don't know what to do. It's transitioning that's hard. Switching tasks without a clear external cue can feel like trying to change gears in a car that just doesn't want to move. You might stay too long on one thing or freeze before starting the next, or feel overwhelmed trying to prioritize what's urgent. Executive dysfunction disrupts predicting, planning, estimating, initiating. And the emotional toll of that, it's heavy because you can be fully aware of what needs to happen and still feel physically unable to begin. That's not a moral failing. That's how executive dysfunction feels in the body. So let's look at this through different stages of life. So let's start with children. A child with time blindness might repeatedly ask when something will start. They might melt down when told 5 more minutes, because 5 more minutes is abstract. It doesn't mean anything internally. Transitions feel sudden and disorientating. For adolescents, teenagers might underestimate how long homework will take. They may struggle with punctuality, stay up too late because they didn't feel time passing, and often they're labelled careless when they're actually struggling neurologically. And in adults, in adulthood, time blindness can affect work performance, deadlines, meetings, and it can impact relationships. It can impact self-care, and often by this point, there's accumulated shame layered on top of it. Trauma and the nervous system. Now, this part matters. Many neurodivergent people have experienced trauma. When your nervous system is stuck in fight or flight, time perception changes. If your body is constantly bracing for danger, your brain prioritizes survival, not tracking time. This can show up as time dilation, everything slowing down, time compression, everything speeding up and feeling disconnected from the present moment. So sometimes time blindness isn't just executive function, it's a nervous system that's been under chronic stress, and that deserves compassion. So what do? First, we dismantle shame. Neurotypical productivity standards were not designed with neurodivergent wiring in mind. So instead of trying to force your brain into a mold, what if we built scaffolding around it? Externalize time. If your internal clock is unreliable, make time visual. Visual timers, auditory alarms, countdown apps, transition reminders, written schedules that you can see. Don't rely on internal estimation alone. I know I heavily rely on writing things down, putting things on my calendar and putting notes and reminders on my phone. Build around energy. Instead of I should work 9 to 5, ask, when is my brain most alert? When do I naturally focus best? Work with your rhythm. Gentle transitions add buffer time. Use rituals to signal shifts. Warn your nervous system before change. And use self-compassion. Replace, I should be better at this, with my brain experiences time differently. You're allowed to design systems that work for you. Flow, autonomy, and choice. Flow isn't the enemy. It's often where joy lives. The goal isn't elimination, it's awareness. If time blindness is interfering with your goals or well-being, you can experiment with strategies, but you also have autonomy. You get to decide how you relate to time. You get to honor your internal rhythm. If time has always felt slippery, if you spent years feeling bad at life because you can't track minutes the way others do, I want you to hear this. You are not irresponsible. You're not careless, and you're certainly not lazy. Your brain experiences time differently. And once we understand the wiring, the prefrontal cortex, the basal ganglia, the cerebellum, executive dysfunction, nervous system activation, the shame starts to loosen. Time blindness isn't a personal flaw. It's a difference in perception. And when we stop fighting that difference, we can start building support around it. If this resonated, tell me in the comments, what does time feel like for you? And if you found this helpful, please like, subscribe, and tap that notification bell. It really does help this community grow. You deserve support that understands your brain, not systems that shame it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.